Can a robot be human? I'm asking you, can a robot be human? I would like to take a moment to address those watching this video that might want to respond no to this question. Let me ask you a few follow-up questions. Imagine somebody was in a serious car accident. An accident so serious that that person lost an arm. Imagine that person had their arm replaced with a bionic arm, one that has all the functionality of a normal human arm. Is that person still human? What if that person permanently damaged a part of their brain and had that part replaced with an artificial component? Is that person still human? They would function just like a normal human being, except their arm and a piece of their brain would be artificial. Now here's the big question. Let's assume that human being had most of their body replaced with artificial components. Hell, maybe their entire body has been replaced. At what point does that human being stop being human and become a robot? A few months ago, I addressed a question similar to this one when I analyzed a video game called Soma. Imagine a machine had the same level of consciousness as a human. Does that machine have the same, greater, or lesser value than a human? The mere focus on that question alone and the existential anxieties it evokes made Soma, in my opinion, one of the most profound games I had ever played. Little did I know that less than a year prior, another game managed to tackle not just that question, but many others in an equally, if not more profound way. The Talos Principle. Considering this game not only has a thought-provoking story, but also has gameplay reminiscent of the Portal franchise, which I absolutely love, it is absolutely criminal that this game is not discussed more by the gaming community. I look on YouTube and the search results mostly come up with videos whose view counts rest in the tens of thousands. Compared to most other games like the Talos Principle, or just games in general, those are very low numbers. If you take the high praise this game has received and combine that with the low attention and low sales, I can only conclude that the Talos Principle is one of, if not the, most underrated game of all time. Very few forms of media will permanently rearrange your thought structures the way the Talos Principle did for me. And I'm not just talking about the mind-bending puzzles. The titular principle the game refers to details how there are certain uncomfortable realities that won't change regardless of one's belief system. These realities not only boil down to people, places, and events, but also the existence of questions. The question of whether or not a robot can be human is one of many that the Talos Principle deals with. Today, I would like to analyze some of the bigger, more uncomfortable questions this game evokes, and explain some of the concepts that underlie. But be warned, the concepts discussed in this game have permanently changed the way I look at the world around me, for better and for worse. There's a solid chance that this might occur for you as well. Needless to say, there are spoilers ahead. The story and setting of this game should be familiar to anyone with a cursory knowledge of the Jewish or Christian faiths. Both story and setting play on the creationist myth of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. According to the myth, God created the first man from the dust of the earth. In the game, Elohim, which is the Hebrew word for deity, tells the android you play as that you have risen from the dust to roam his garden. Both you and the biblical Adam are told that they are free to roam the lands created for them and do as they wish, under one condition. In regards to the game, you are forbidden to enter the Great Tower, for in the day that you do, you will surely die. In regards to the Bible, Adam is forbidden from eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. In the Bible, both Adam and his future companion Eve were tempted by a serpent in the garden. This serpent is canonically understood to be the devil, Satan, but in a different form. The serpent convinces both Adam and Eve that once they ate from the tree, they would become like God in the sense that they too would know good and evil. In the game, there is a character similar to Satan, the Milton library assistant, but we'll call him Milton for short. When speaking to Milton through the terminals, he tries to make you question your presuppositions, be it in regards to the world Elohim built, your moral principles, and everything in between. After having several exchanges with Milton, Elohim will intervene and speak the following words.
Do not think I know not the deceiver slithering through the hidden words.
One of the main things this biblical story is meant to impart to its religious adherents is that God created humans in His image. This means a lot of things, but for the purposes of this video, we'll focus on only a couple of aspects. In one respect, being able to discern order out of chaos is to be made in the image of God. Now, what does that mean? Well, it is through words and actions that human beings can communicate and learn to overcome the challenges of life, or to create order out of chaos. The act of speaking to make order out of chaos is mirrored in the same creationist myth. At the very beginning of the Bible, God said, "Let there be light," and out of nothingness, out of chaos, there was light. There was order. This act of God was defined in the Gospel of John as logos, which in Greek means the Word of God. The divine concept of logos is referred to as the hidden words in the Talos Principle.
These worlds, and we within them, are made of words. Hidden words, invisible to you, yet part of all things. Long ago, I shaped these lands according to the purpose of the hidden words. Thus all things have meaning, where before was only chaos.
A second way that humans are made in the image of God is that we supposedly have freedom of will. Unlike animals who live unconsciously and by instinct, humans have the ability to think before they act, and then choose their action based on a moral judgment. In the Bible, Adam took Satan's information into consideration and chose to defy God by eating from the tree. Similarly, in the Talos Principle, you have the choice to live in accordance with Elohim's wishes or to see what is at the top of the tower. Depending on the choice you make, it will result in a certain ending. The concept of free will is of the highest importance to this discussion for the following reason. God gave humans free will when He, in theory, could have let the inhabitants of His creation live in unconscious bliss. Why would God do that? Well, there's a document in the Talos Principle that will help us answer this question. The following is an excerpt from a book called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by a 17th century poet and painter named William Blake. Quote, "Without contraries is no progression. Attraction and repulsion, reason and energy, love and hate are necessary to human existence. From these contraries spring what the religious call good and evil. Good is the passive that obeys reason. Evil is the active springing from energy. The phenomenon of contraries or opposites is universal to human experience. They are necessary in order to give dimension to a positive or negative quality. There can be no light if it cannot illuminate darkness. There can be no love if there is no hate to conquer. The biblical God figured that the only way He could create a truly loving fellowship with mankind is if He gave them free will, if He made them conscious of contraries. Otherwise, they would merely be brainless slaves, purely ignorant of the reality of darkness and evil. There had to be the possibility of acting negatively towards God, the possibility of questioning His creation. There can be no true love of God without negative qualities to give dimension to that love. Only by giving humans free will could the love of God expand, or to use Blake's words, progress. In regards to the Talos Principle, the character of Alexandra Drennan comments on the problem of free will in regards to the creation of artificial intelligence. In order for an android to truly have human consciousness, to be intelligent, it had to prove its ability to question.
Intelligence is more than just problem solving. Intelligence is questioning the assumptions you're presented with. Intelligence is the ability to question existing thought constructs. If we don't make that part of the simulation, all we'll create is a really effective slave.
Now, if one accepts Alexandra's comments on intelligence, as well as the concept of contraries, certain uncomfortable questions arise. If the biblical God created a universe filled with opposites, if He created human beings to have free will in this universe, and the biblical God is all-knowing, is it possible that God knew that humans would inevitably doubt Him, that they would fall from His grace and, quote, surely die? Worse yet, was the fall of man into consciousness a necessary tragedy? Otherwise, How could Adam have transcended the limitation he was under? How could he stop being a really effective slave and have a truly loving relationship with God, to choose light over darkness? Well, the only way he could have, it seems, is if he defied God in order to become conscious and truly attain free will.
You were always meant to defy me. That was the final trial.
When I have seen people discuss this game online, I see a lot of praise regarding the game's criticism of religion, specifically Christianity. I've seen some go so far as to say that the game in its totality is an argument for atheism. The game's argument in favor of defying God to transcend limitation is one such argument. While the game certainly makes powerful arguments against religion, I cannot help but notice how the game also pays immense respect to religious tradition and the wisdom therein. Citing the aforementioned William Blake, a lifelong Christian, is one such example. The most important example, however, is the game's treatment of the Milton/Deceiver/Satan character. While one might assume, based on what I have already presented, that the game is vindicating Milton for heroically questioning Elohim, it also demonstrates Satan's limitations as an agent of doubt. Because the Satan character is named Milton, I have to conclude that the game's writers were inspired by the 17th century poet John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is an epic poem that retells not only the Garden of Eden story, but also the events that happened prior to the universe's creation. Throughout Paradise Lost, John Milton tries to write Satan as a much more three-dimensional character. Though Satan is ultimately and obviously the villain, he is nonetheless recognized for his qualities. Before Satan became God's primary adversary, he was an angel named Lucifer, one of God's highest angels. He had an angelic intelligence, a fact that is mirrored in the very name Lucifer, which means light bringer. Throughout Paradise Lost, the reader is struck by Satan's magnificence, his rich, sensuous, lofty rhetoric, and his determination to be true to himself. In regards to the Talos Principle, the conversations one can have with Milton can be invigorating. The question I posed at the beginning of this video regarding whether or not robots can be human was a question that Milton poses at one point in the game. Milton debates the question with you slowly and logically and in a very polite manner. Little does one know, while having this conversation, that one's answer to the question will have their respective implications. If a robot can be manufactured to mimic the human experience, in body and in mind, how special does that really make human beings in the eyes of a supposed god? If human consciousness can be replicated with clusters of computer data, is it possible that human beings are just clusters of organic data? What about when that data is terminated? Is there an afterlife for the robot? If you think there isn't, well, how about for a human? Does our sense of self dissipate in death? All these questions are crafted to place those who ponder them in a state of existential anxiety and perpetual doubt, a state that mimics that of Satan, or Milton in this case. What Elohim says of Milton in the game is that his wisdom is hollow and born of despair. There is truth to this statement, as the conversations you have with Milton later in the game become increasingly hostile, not only towards you, but to existence itself. Every time you make a hopeful or optimistic response to Milton's claims, it will chastise you for your stupidity and delusion. For every statement you make regarding your own personal belief, Milton will cast reasonable doubt on it. For every bit of light, Milton tries to offer a greater darkness. While there is utility in doubt, too much can lead to, as I previously said, existential anxiety, madness, resentment. The pain this state confers can lead one to such a dark state that one might wonder why God would allow it. This is Satan's primary motivation. This is why he will eternally antagonize God and his creation. In Satan's mind, life is so painful and full of doubt that it would be better if it had never existed. But as the Talos Principle demonstrates, this ideological position is only conducive to destruction. It's not pleasant having people label you as euphorically stupid all of the time, but nevertheless, in order to transcend a limitation, doubt is necessary. In other words, the Talos Principle will both chastise Milton for doubting everything, but also give him his due, because doubt is necessary. While it is useful to have faith in existence and believe it is inherently meaningful, too much faith could potentially blind you to reality, realities that need to be confronted in order to be able to grow as an individual, in ability, in intelligence, in love. One must contend with these contraries, with darkness and light, just as God created them. But before one does so, one must acknowledge the realities of both darkness and light and confront them honestly, as the Talos Principle commands. Only then can a being, human or otherwise, become truly free. Thanks so much for watching, and thanks again to Alex for helping me with the religious aspects of this script. Before you go, make sure to like this video. When you do that, the YouTube algorithm takes this video and puts it into people's recommended feeds, because you're telling it that this video is worth watching. If you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'd love for there to be more discussion surrounding this game.